Hello there, good evening. So, today we're going to present one of my group mates, as we're going to present the translation gender. I am assigned to report this one, to present the study about translation and gender. When it comes to the word translation and gender, there's a definite terms on it. When we said translation, it is focused on the whole depicts the picture or the study of a word, of a sentence, or a grammar, or a language. We construct it to another form of words, added more definite um, answers, or more definite um, quotations when it comes to translating. So as a whole, that was called translation. So, and the people who translate sentence, some words or some studies or theories, and translating it to other forms of language, and they were called translator. So for today, we're going to focus on the studies of translation and gender. So when it comes to gender, there is what we called the perspective or the of a person identity of a person when it comes to their sex, or yeah, a female or a male. However, in this kind of world, we are born to we are familiar with a patriarchal system. When you read some books, when you study some books, you have read there that men and women, or what we call him or he or she, that is derived or that is focusing on the gender identity of a people in a context. So today we're going to discover what are the translation and the gender. And now here are some viewpoints of what we call the study of translation and gender. The interest of cultural studies and translation inevitably took translation studies away from purely linguistic analysis and brought it to into contact with other disciplines. Yet this process of disciplinary hybridization, according to Simon 1996, has not always been straightforward. According to Sherry Simon in her gender translation, cultural identity in the and the politics of transmission in the year of 1996. Now, criticizing translation studies for often using the term culture as if it referred to an obvious and unproblematic reality. Lefebvre, for example, had defined it as simply the environment of literary system. Simon approaches translation from a gender studies single. She sees a language of sexism in translation studies, with its images of dominance, fidelity, faithfulness, and betrayal. Typical is the 17th century image of Les Billis Infidelis, translation into French that were artistically beautiful but unfaithful, more in 1955, or George Steiner's French that were artistically beautiful but unfaithful, more in George Steiner's male-oriented image of translation as spiritual and after Babel. So the study of translation gender, we are, as what I have said earlier, that we are focused, we are being manipulates by the society, by the order of reading a literature or books from the history. So for what we call the example of the patriarchal system is what we call the Bible, or any holy scripture. Yeah, back to the topic. Holy scripture. Um, when we study the Holy Scripture, you can read there that a genderized term for God as a man, or yeah, as a supreme one. In the text, when you when you call somebody supreme, they will mention it as man. So we are being enlightened by the society of patriarchy that man is the highest than women. So um, no, the study of Simon and the other translator or the feminist theory, they mentioned that the balance, the equality, the equity of genderization in the culture identity in the terms of translation into translating into another forms of text. So yeah, and the feminist theories see a parallel between the studies of translation. Back to the topic, according to yeah, that was mentioned, the penetration in after Babel in chapter 10. So it is it is quoted from the book of Genesis chapter 10, I think. I don't know when you say Babel, and also in yeah, I think chapter 10 it was in the book of the Bible, but as what I have remembered, that was in chapter 11. I don't know what which chapter it is, but when you say Babel, that the beginning of the confusion of people, they were mixed together, and the language produces itself in many different forms of languages in that time. So now in the study of language, the feminist theory see a parallel between the status of translation, which is often considered to be derivative and inferior to original writing, and that of women is often repressed in society and literature. This is the core of feminist translation theory, which seeks to identify and critique the tangle of concepts which relegates both women and translation to the bottom of the social and literary ladder. But Simon takes this further in the concept of the committed translation project. For feminist translation, fidelity is to be directed toward neither the author nor the reader, but towards the writing project, a project in which both writer and translator participate, according to Simon 1996. So, when we say the reader and the translator, there is no gender bias when it comes to writing, according to Simon in 1996. So when the reader and the writer and even the translator participate when it comes to literature, even in non-literary text. But um, as what I have so many times they have mentioned that we are being born, we're being awake from the society of being biased to gender as male and female, and put it into text and literature in many books that they would only prefer men to call as men and women as women. So, but according to Simon, a project in which both writer and translator participate. So Simon gives examples of Canadian feminist translators from Quebec who seek to emphasize the identity and ideological stance in the translation project. So one of these, Barbara Goddard, one of the theorists and translator, is openly assertive about the manipulation this involves, the feminist translator affirming her critical difference, her delight interminable rereading and rewriting, the flaws, the signs of her manipulation of the text. Like for example, E, the big symbol of E is one. In human, also the letter M is bigger than usual writing. So in Gordon 1990, Simon also quotes the introduction to a translation of Lies Govin's letters Dune, or I don't know how to read that one, by another committed feminist theory, a translator rather, Suzanne de Louvenier Howard. Harwood, I don't know. The latter explains her translation strategy in political terms. My translation practice is a political activity aimed at making language speaker for women. So my translation so my signature on a translation means this translation has used every translation strategy to make the feminine visible in language. So that's their purpose also. Um, One such strategy discussed by Simon is the treatment of linguistic markers of gender. Examples quoted from Lloyd Binier Howard's translations include using bold E, that what is mentioned a while ago, in the word one to emphasize the feminine. A capitalization of M in humans writes to show the implicit sexism, the neologism, gism, author as opposed to author. To translate the French auteur and the female, I don't know how to read that, it's so difficult. Personification of nouns such as ob or down, don rather, with the English pronoun she. Also, in other chapters in Simon's book, revolve revalue the contribution women translators have made to translation throughout history, discuss the distortion in the translation French feminist theory, and look at feminist translations of the Bible. Um, Among the case studies are summaries of the key literary translation were carried out by women in the first half of the 20th century. Simon points out that the great classics of Russian literature were initially made available in English in translations produced mainly by women. Constance Garnett. So in her 60 volumes of translation include almost the entire work of Turgenev, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and back to the topic. So Jonas, it's so hard to read. Some keywords of literature in German were translated by women translations. Translators Jen Starr, author Answer Milliam Moore, in conjunction with her husband Edwin and Helen Low Porter. The important role played by women translations translators up to the present is emphasized by the Simon's reference to the famous Suzanne Jill Levine, the translator of Guillermo Cabrera Infante's Tristas Tigres. In contrast to the self-effacing work of some of the early translators mentioned above, Levine collaborated closely with Infante in creating a new work, as we discussed in chapter 9. Yeah, it was quoted from the book. From the feminist perspective, however, it is not only Levine's self confidence but also her awareness of a certain betrayal, translating a male discourse that speaks of the women betrayed, that fascinates Simon. She hints at the possible ways Levine may have rewritten, manipulated, and betrayed Infante's work in her own feminist project. So, as what I have, according to chapter 10 and chapter 9, I think it is not really related to the Holy Scripture. It was really recoded from a book of Simon, shares Simon. So, and I think that was the end of the topic that I am assigned to report today. And I was grateful to assign this topic. And rediving and rediscovering the the path, rediscovering the history of knowing the feminist theory, perspective, or a gender biased. So thanks to this translator, they were they enlightened the other reader, just not to be biased on gender, but according to what Simon said in her, that the writer and the translator would participate. Yeah, according to her, according to her project, a project which in which both writer and the translator participate. So that's one of the example that in the society where we will living today, there's none. There's the gender biased, but equality and equity. So, and I think that would be the end of my topic. And I'm John Libara, the presenter of translator, translations and gender. Thank you.